Hey, this is Dave from MetalEpidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What is up, guys? Dave here from Metal Epidemic, back with another album review. And for this review, Duncan Kyle and myself have been checking out the new album from Swedish metal queen Scarlet. Scarlet's new album, Obey the Queen, will be released on November 13th via A Rising Empire. So this is a debut album from Scarlet, which was written mostly alone at her home in the cold north of Sweden. Each song on the album portrays a time or situation of change in Scarlet's life, from raging about receiving unsolicited nudes in Ugly Fucker, female oppression in the workplace in Boss Bitch, to the more delicate topics of love in Love Heroin and death in Crocodile. Obey the Queen is a snapshot into the mind of Scarlet. So, one of the main reasons we picked this album.
Listen, the album's come into you, Dave, and ultimately you sent it across. So,
let's just
default,
back up a little bit.
Let's just
back that up a little bit.
And you own the website and you own the YouTube and all the rest. So if this video makes it out, it's because you've decided to put it out. So me and Kyle, innocent bystanders.
I asked the question, and I mentioned one other band, which was Poppy, and Duncan said, "Yes, Dave, let's review this album."
Yeah, because I'm still sore that we keep avoiding the fact that she has a top 10 album this year we refuse to review. Look at his face. So, man, raging.
If it wasn't clear, Duncan is a big fan of Poppy and their new album. I disagree.
Yes.
And I do disagree.
He does disagree.
And as I said, there was a mention of Poppy in the press release for this one, so unsurprisingly, it has ended up in our review pile, thanks to Duncan. But I would just like to state,
you would argue,
for the record, that whilst I don't mind bits of I disagree, I don't love it either. I went at this album tentatively.
It's almost as if, like, Duncan understands that this is a metal review podcast and not a death metal review podcast. So every time something comes in which doesn't
How did you get that idea?
Well, every time something comes in which doesn't default into one genre that Dave keeps oppressively pushing on us, like Duncan is like that. You know what makes a good, because we bulk record these, what makes a good collection of reviews where we're not saying the same things over and over again, and that's variety. So, like, yeah, I jumped on this one. We will find out whether or not it was a good decision momentarily. Now, you've obviously set us up here and you've turned away. You're not even making eye contact.
At least he didn't bring up David Bowie in a metal podcast.
He's talking shite, Kyle, because if you look at the last batch of albums we reviewed, hardly any of them are death metal. So he talks
no death metal come in. Like, no death metal come in. If the death metal comes in, it goes up to the top. Goes up to the top of the. I love how this is like literally like. Scarlet has spent time basically writing an album about how fucking horrible men are, and we are proving our point on this recording. I am hashtag me and all, right? Yeah. I'm where on this one. I was genuinely curious because Poppy's album has only been out. Poppy's metal album has only been out. What? It came out in January, and we are now getting releases from artists directly saying, "Oh, for fans of Poppy," or "sounds like Poppy," or whatever. That to me seems a bit strange. You know what I mean? Like that would become such an influence on anything. To me, what I personally thought was, and what I was proved very fucking right on very, very quickly, is this is clearly the marketing vehicle here. It's female fronted. Well, it's Poppy. She sings about men, so it's Poppy. Like, if this was a couple of years before, like 10 years before, she'd be getting compared to Kitty. Like, it's lazy pigeonholing, and I fucking hate it. I mean, there's the big thing for me about listening to Scarlet is that there's clearly a ton of ideas here, and it's a varied sounding album. but to me it sounds like a collage of songs as opposed to sounding like an album of songs. And I think that was the big downside for me, was it, like, the standalone tracks sound fine. In the context of an album, it sounds very disjointed and very muddled. We jump, whereas, and I know you're going to throw the poppy thing at me, right? But there is a through line with that album. There's a through line specifically, not only conceptually with the lyrics that she's singing, but to me, the production techniques and the styles all exist in a weird little bubble. So when she's jumping from kind of shoegaze into industrial, that kind of matches, and when she's going from industrial to metal, that kind of matches, and when a new metal riff kicks in, that kind of matches. When I'm listening to this, I'm hearing elements of things like Butcher Babes, you know, which I'm surprised that's not mentioned in the fucking press, because that's much more apt, and they sing about a lot of stuff which is in a similar boat. But I mean, like, as standalone songs, they sounded fine. Like, to use a Kyle quote from a couple of weeks ago, if I was in a metal bar having beers and this, you know, some of the songs from this album come on, I'd be fucking, you know, having a riot. I think they sound very much like that. Big, nice, chunky guitar sound and her doing her thing. I think she tries to cover too many vocal techniques. I think she's not very good at rapping. I don't know if she's going to hate me for that. I don't think she's very good at that, and I think you know, that was off-putting. She's got an interesting vocal sound. It can go from quite deep to actually a really nice mid-range vocal that she's got. She's got an aggressive tone that doesn't sound like she's trying to sound like a man, which I appreciate. I think a lot of female metal vocalists that do the growly, screamy stuff try and sound too much like men, as opposed to leaning into tones which I think are more comfortable within their range. And some of the lyrical themes, now that you've described them to me, actually make a lot of sense. And I quite like that idea of, I don't get unsolicited nudes as much as I keep offering myself out there and handing my phone number to people and saying, send me anything. I don't care if it's female or male, just send me your nudes. But there's a lot of that in there, and I love that idea of the experience women have to go through, and this is a guy talking about mansplaining. The experience women have to go through is completely different than what men have to go through on a day-to-day basis. So someone taking that as an artistic outlet to put that out there, I think that's a great idea. And as a vehicle for this, and being written in isolation, and, you know, reaching out to that, I think that's a great idea. To me, what is missing from this album overall is a through line. You know, she's clearly got a concept is what it's like to be her in a day-to-day life like that, and I think that's great. I think that's brilliant, and I like that as an idea. I just think the album doesn't feel like, it feels too disjointed. We jump from one specific kind of, you know, really chunky metally sort of thing to something that doesn't feel overtly akin to it, and it became, by the end of it, I was like, this almost feels like a spec tape for different, like, she could do this style, or she could do this style, or she could do this style, instead of this is her style. And that's the big thing for me coming out of it. It's a very well recorded, very well written album. It is too disparate to hold my attention throughout. This is the sort of album that I'll go back and listen to 3 or 4 songs out of, but not listen to the whole album, and that's not how I like listening to music. If I sit down to listen to a band, I listen to an album. I don't just pick my favourite songs from the album. So it was a kind of a weird experience. I'm glad I've listened to it though, at least, and I'm glad we're at least talking about it. So if nothing else, even if it didn't resonate with me, I'd be interested to see who you guys fall on it.
Okay. Kyle. What did you make of this debut album from Scarlet?
I mean, I see a lot of what Duncan's saying, and I agree with a lot of it. I love the lyrical themes. I really do, like all of that, and I love that she's just putting it in your face. It's a very metal thing to do, to take this is a fucking uncomfortable subject, or something that I've been through. I hated the shit out of this. Fuck you, here it is. So I really like that, like ugly fucker and boss bitch and all that stuff. And actually, even though like you were saying, the musical themes didn't quite fit with I Spit Fire, I did like the lyrical content behind it. So it was like, okay, the 2 songs right after each other didn't really work for me either. It was like, the first song was like quite a chunky metal riff. It was quite new metal, a little bit generic, but I mean, But then I Spit Fire came and I was like, where are we now? The thing that really got me about this, her singing voice is absolutely fantastic. And I was sat there listening to her. I wish I could get her to sing on one of my songs, because I honestly love my riffs, with the 8-string down-tuned guitar and stuff. And I could do something and get it and not produce the thing out the fucking life out of it. Because again, it's too polished and too squeaky clean, and the guitars are too perfectly put in the stereos, the frequency spectrum and everything like that. And I'm just like, oh, again, come on. So it's another one of those far too overproduced albums. But there's a lot to like here, but there's a lot to like kind of put you off as well. I think my favorite song was Crocodile. I don't know why, but it just really spoke to me. It was a bit less like over the top and stuff like that, and like the couple of slow songs you had, like Love Horizon and Final Shot, really showcased her vocal talent as well. Not just the crazy guttural screaming and growling, which of course did sound like her, which was good, but she actually can sing as well, which was really good to hear. So it's not just like she's a crazy metal person that just wants to growl into a microphone. It's like she has something to say. It might not have all come together like in a very cohesive way on this album, but I think in the future it might well do that.
It's interesting, Dave, when Dave said that she lives in the how my brain works. My brain's fucked, by the way, it really is, and the longer we do these things, the more fucked it gets. But when Dave was like that, she wrote these from the cold north of Sweden, or as Kyle likes to call that, the warm south, because he's north of that. She's complaining about the weather. Try living in Norway. She also, like, if you're wanting her on that track, she's not that far away from you, buddy. She can't be if she's right up the north. So,
that's true.
Dave, I apparently, quote unquote, forced this on you, and made you listen to it. Like, she didn't want to do it.
Being totally honest, I wouldn't have picked this for review. Being me, this is not an album that's that's in my
sphere of interest.
Yes, it's not. But I'm open to listening.
Dave's wheelhouse is on another street.
Yeah. But I'm open to listening to anything. I will check it out. And the whole poppy thing, I can see why the comparison has been made. Whilst they don't necessarily sound the same, their albums are very different. But they're similar in that they both add a kind of multitude of styles to the blender. And this is a band that throws a lot at the wall. Not all of it sticks. Most of it has that kind of metal edge with plenty of, it's got the big riffs that lean towards the kind of metalcore or progressive metal territory. Then there's other tracks that go for a more kind of rock driven approach, and then you've got an occasional track that has a more kind of ballad type feel, or they up the ratio of industrial or electronic elements. Overall, a kind of bit of it's kind of similar to what you guys are saying, a bit of a mix of highs and lows on this one. I actually liked the first section of the album though. I thought Obey the Queen was a great start to the album. It's very anthemic vocally, but it almost feels like it's a kind of warm-up to what's to come, like it's kind of building to something. I Spit Fire, as you said, Kyle, it kind of takes a turn, and I was not expecting the second track to sound that way. It's the chorus had an almost kind of like raga, almost like a kind of Skindred kind of vibe to it. But it still has a little kind of bursts of heavier, more kind of metalcore type riffing through it. Track 3 is Ugly Fucker, which is one of the singles they've released. And on this one I could hear some similarities to Poppy and the kind of quirky kind of vocal style in the verses at times. The choruses had a more of a kind of stomping kind of metal feel you'd get from a band like Butcher Babies. And musically that kind of driving force is something that Scarlet do kind of try to inject into this album quite regularly. Tracks like Boss Bitch and Beauty and the Beast have a very kind of hard-hitting charge to them, which those tracks did kind of get my attention. Unfortunately, there just wasn't enough moments that got me that excited. I did feel like as the album went on, it became just kind of more and more familiar. I felt that the vocal style did get a little repetitive. Musically, I kind of felt like I'd heard it all before. Even the kind of piano ballad type tracks that are slotted in, well, those are not my type of thing anyway at the best of times. But again, they felt very expected. And I can see why they added those types of tracks, to give the album that kind of ebb and flow. But we've heard In This Moment do this type of thing 100 times before, so it didn't really add anything new or mind-blowing to the album for me. And that's kind of my main complaint, really. Whilst they do some things well on Obey the Queen, it just doesn't think outside the box enough for me. There's too many elements that sound like something or someone else, and I think that's why it didn't really leave much of an impact on me. But on a positive note, this band have only been on the go for 2 and a bit years, almost 3 years, so they are still very much in their infancy of being a band, really, and finding their sound. And I think when you take that into account, I think Obey the Queen is a decent first attempt. I didn't think it was a terrible album, just a little unremarkable, to be honest. So you never know, going forward on their next release, they might come back with an album that more defines who they are. I hope they do. I watched an interview with Scarlet, and they've got another female vocalist called Thirsty, and they seem like really nice people who are really enjoying what they're doing. So good luck to them on the next release. This one for me, as I said, some highs and probably more lows, but there were bits of it that I did like, so it wasn't a total bust. I didn't hate it or anything like that, but for the most part, it wasn't really up my street. Rating wise, where are we all sitting on this one? Duncan, where are you sitting with this album from Scarlet?
Yeah, like I say, overall, to me, there's some stuff that really, really works, some stuff that didn't really work, and the song kind of structure, in terms of where they've placed them on the album, at times was a bit disjointed and a bit off-putting. But she has another album. I will check that album out, and I do think she has a great voice. I think she has a voice for metal. I don't mean that as a dismissive way. She is perfectly, the genre that she is singing in is perfectly suited to her voice. So I would give it a 2.5 because there's stuff on there that, like I say, if they did a whole album of that sort of music, I'd be totally down with that. I just think there's maybe, it kind of almost feels like the throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks is actually the perfect way to describe this album. Is like a ton of different stuff flung there, and the stuff that sticks, I wish she'd just done a whole album of that, if I'm honest. So 2.5.
Cool. Kyle, what about yourself?
Oh man, I don't know. It's tough to say because the stuff that worked for me really worked for me, and the stuff that didn't was like, oh come on, you can do better, And it's like, oh. And plus I want to see where they go. And track. Plus I wanted to get, so it's definitely a 6 out of 5.
It's not a video podcast. Why are you doing the call me thing when you're...
Oh yeah, crap, that's not my phone number either, is it? Yeah, I don't know. The stuff that worked, it did work, but the stuff that didn't, plus the production was done to death as well. But I mean, I don't know, it's like, I think I'm going to go with 3.5 out of 5 because it's a good first attempt. They've only been doing it for 2 years. To have an album of music after only 2 years is pretty impressive. And I really want to see what comes next as well, because I think they've got a lot of potential and can probably come back with something that will kick you in the face, and you'll enjoy it next time. So,
yeah, and we will review it when it comes in, Dave.
Yeah,
right. I know.
I'm gonna have to now.
Don't make me fucking force things, right?
Yeah, I'm sitting at the same as Duncan. Actually, I've got a 2.5 out of 5 for me on this album. Very much what you were just saying, Duncan. Bits of it work, bits of it not really, and there was a lot of it that just kind of reminded me of other stuff. I think they need to have a look at their kind of overall sound and pick the parts that really work and kind of focus on that, and hopefully we hear a new album from them very soon and we can check it out. If you want to check this one out, it drops on November 13th on A Rising Empire. The album is called Obey the Queen. Check them out online at facebook.com/Scarlet Hunts. I'll put a little link in the description below, so you can check it out and let us know what you think. If you've heard any, I think there's been a few singles dropped from the album. Check them out, let us know what you think. When you hear the album, feel free to stick a comment in below. Much appreciated for checking out the review. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, Take care, and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Call me.